Hi, I'm Preston Williams, and welcome to another edition of Jazz Talk. Today on our show, we have a very special guest who needs no introduction. He's been on the scene for over 30 years and has worked with many greats from Dizzy Gillespie to Art Blakey, Herbie Hancock, Quincy Jones, Sting, Gladys Knight, and Shaka Khan, to name a few. He is a guitarist and composer. Please welcome to Jazz Talk, Mr. Mark Whitfield. Brother, how's it going, man?
Man, it's going great. I'll tell you what, I'm gonna move to a different part of the living room.
Okay,
Sure.
sure.
On the subject. How about that?
Okay. Oh, that's perfect. That's perfect.
Here we go.
Yeah, it's so good to have you on the show today, man.
Man, it's my pleasure. I'm glad you reached out. I'm always excited to talk about music and talk to folks who are interested in hearing about what's going on.
Yeah, fantastic.
But I don't think I'm doing very. There you go.
Perfect. Yeah, you good right. Now. You good. Well, listen, man. Like I said, you've been on the scene for quite a long time, for over 30 years, and you've worked with countless greats. But I'm interested in knowing a little bit more, Mark, about your background, how you got involved in music, starting out. How did all this begin?
I owe it all to my parents, my folks. My father was born in 1920 and my mother was born in 1923. Okay. So they were, generationally speaking, they were jazz fans. And so I grew up with that music in the house. As a young man, I was encouraged to take music lessons. My older brother gave me my first guitar when I was 7 years old. Yeah. I took up playing the upright bass in the school orchestra in the 4th grade, and the saxophone in the school band in the 5th grade. And it was a hobby. I mean, my parents took me to a lot of concerts. I was able to see the Ellington Band in the early 70s. I saw Count Basie, I saw Sarah Vaughan. I got to see Joe Pass and Ella Fitzgerald together with Oscar Peterson. Wow. A lot of great concerts at the Westbury Music Concert, at the theater, the Round Theater that rotated there on Long Island where I grew up. Yeah. And so I always made sure that I got to see and hear lots of music. There was also a great series. I grew up in a town called Lindenhurst on Long Island. Yeah. Okay. It was a great series at the public library. And I remember seeing people like Chris Woods, the great legendary saxophone player, come out when I was just a little kid. Wow. At the local library for school kids. And I say all the time that experiencing jazz early in life live is really the way to fall in love with the music. Which there's nothing like watching great musicians create something with no music in front of them. Mm-hmm. And I was already playing in organized ensembles in school, and so I had a very, very rudimentary understanding of what it was like to be in a band and look at music. But to see you guys play something that was obviously required a high skill level, not just like a rock band or some guys singing or dancing, which is another great thing. But to see some guys execute this music at a really, really high level of proficiency, seemingly without having rehearsed it and with no music, and having so much fun doing it and being able to talk about it, articulate it intellectually and clearly, that hit me right dead center, even as a little kid. Yeah. And so at that point, I had no intention, not that I really knew what I wanted to do at 10 years old anyway, but I had certainly had no idea that I was going to become a jazz musician or a musician in general. Mm-hmm. I always wanted to be a doctor. I come from a family of professionals, and I wanted to follow in the footsteps of everyone else in the family. Yeah. But my parents made sure that they encouraged me to stay active in extracurricular pursuits. So I stayed in the orchestra, and I stayed in the jazz band. I played bass. I got a scholarship to Berkeley. As a bass player with my high school jazz orchestra. I was in the 9th grade. We went up to Boston to compete in the high school jazz band competition, and I got a scholarship there as a soloist. Which is at the time, it's funny. I think about what it costs to go to school now, and the scholarship. Yeah. It was $1,000 scholarship. $1,000 towards tuition. Right. But if you remember, when I eventually enrolled at Berkeley in 1983, it cost $6,000, maybe $6,500 to go to school for an entire year and live on campus. I think it's now like $60,000 or so. So this $1,000 was in the form of a certificate that I could put aside and use it. I was only in the 9th grade, so I had time. Or in the 10th grade, I had time. And then my parents retired, and we moved to a suburb outside of Seattle, Washington. a place called Bellevue. So we moved there in summer of '82, and I had always wanted to play guitar in the jazz band. But the guy at my high school, who was a few years older than me, a great guitar player named Teddy Castellucci. It's funny, he's become really famous, but nobody really knows who he is.
Right, right.
Is an oxymoron. Teddy is the guitar player in the Adam Sandler movie, The Wedding Singer.
Okay.
Playing with the guy who looks kind of like Boy George in the movie. But Teddy's also the guy that does all the film scoring for all of Adam's movies, and he toured for years with Boz Scaggs. There was a guy with late night, Rick Dees, that had a TV show for a while, and Teddy was the band leader. His father was a musician, so he was really, really great already at 14 or 15.
Wow.
And so while living on the island, I had no shot of taking the guitar chair from him. But when I got to Seattle, the band out there, the program was less advanced. They didn't have the guitar player. And so I quickly put the bass down and grabbed the guitar. And I was like, man, I'm your guitar player, you know? And so I had a lot of work to make up for, but I had a teacher on Long Island, a guy named Vincent Nazaro, who gave me one of the greatest gifts a teacher could ever give a kid. He knew that I wasn't really practicing that hard. I wasn't really that much into it, but he wrote. I had these manuscript books full of all the information we had gone over for years. So now all of a sudden, the fire is lit. I wanted to be a guitar player. I just went and pulled these books out of the box, and my parents literally had to like pry the guitar out of my hands at night, make me go to bed so I go to school in the morning, because I was trying to make up for lost time. Now, all of a sudden I was really. You could see a kid when the light goes on. I was like, yeah, what I want to do. And I had seen George Benson with his band featured on television with the Boston Pops. Leonard Bernstein used to do those Boston Pops features concerts. Yeah. And it was a PBS thing, and George was on there. And it had to be 1979, something like that, because the Reason record was out, and George had on his way to becoming a megastar. Right. And so I watched it and recorded it with a VCR, and then that video was my Bible, right? And so I had George playing Breezin', and I had a bunch of records that my bass teacher had bought me or recommended that I get, those 1970s Pablo recordings, with Norman Granz's label Pablo. Yeah, and he had Oscar Peterson records. Yeah. It was Styrofoam and Joe, and Joe Pass was on a lot of these records. Right. And so now I've got a second guitar mentor. I've got a second guitar hero, right? I've got George and I got Joe Pass. Yeah. And so I would just, I delved into as much of that as I could understand, and I went through all these things, and I played guitar in the jazz band. And we went to another Berkeley-sponsored high school jazz competition in Westminster, Canada, which was a few hours driving from Seattle, where we lived in Seattle. Right. And I won a second scholarship. Because at this point, I had earned an academic scholarship to attend Georgetown, where one of my older brothers had gone. And I was going to at that age, I thought I was gonna go there and become a doctor. And I went there. I actually went for a summer. They had a summer sciences internship program, and I did well. And I was like, this is gonna be great. But during my time there is when I found out that my parents wanted to relocate from New York to Seattle. And maybe now the people listening or watching think, oh, that's great. But man, in 1981, Seattle was a pumpkin patch. No offense to anybody who was there. Right. But for New Yorker, there was nothing there. It wasn't some great city with all the stuff going on. It was just a lot of outdoors. Right. Which is beautiful. A lot of skiing. But I want to come to New York and play music. And my parents used to bring me in to see Broadway shows. Like I got to see the young lady who was on Stephanie Mills. I got to see her when she made her debut on Broadway at 15. In The Wiz, and I remember years later when I got to meet and play with her, I told her she was practically teary-eyed, but those kinds of things were very unique to New York at that time. Yeah. There weren't a lot of traveling shows. I did, however, get to see the legendary guitar player. He laughed me when I say this stuff, Roddy Jones, but because we're not that different in age, maybe 10 years. But at 15, living in Seattle, my parents took me to see Lena Horne, and she had a traveling Broadway show called Lady of Her Music. And it was, I later found out through watching a documentary about her, that show was a big deal for her, you know. But at the time, I was just like going to see some woman I never really heard of because I was too, you know, too young.
Right.
But she was amazing, and what I remember about the band was this guitar player playing this guitar. He was obviously the band leader. I was so, you know, struck by him. And it was Rodney Jones, one of my really good friends now. You know, it's one of the things about this music, about music in general. Especially I say when I say this music, I speak about jazz specifically, is that. You know, it's such a small community, and coming up playing with people like Jack and Jeff, and I'm skipping around a bit, but
that's fine, man.
With guys like that, they always. One of the things I learned is that when I was 20 and 21 is that there's no such thing as a night off.
Right.
Meaning when you're playing, every time you play, you play, you go for it like it's your last time. Like this is gonna when the curtain comes down on this one, it's the last one, you know, and it's really, and one of the things is you never know who's watching, who's listening, and most people would hear that and think, oh, it's my chance to get discovered. But what you realize in this music is that it's your chance to influence someone. It's part of your legacy.
Yeah.
If that had been Rodney Jones's last concert, he could have counted on me to carry forth what he left behind. You know what I mean? It really comes down to that. If he never played again, he didn't have to worry that somebody was going to say his name and pay respect to him with their music. And so that stuck with me a lot. You know,
Yeah, Mark, I was gonna ask you, like I said, you know, you go through Berkeley,
right,
and you come out and you start working with some very big names, man. And like I said, the first time I heard you was your debut recording, The Marksman. I'm like, man, who is this guy? He's got a nice sound. I could definitely hear the George Benson influence, but it was like very nice, you know. And I remember, I think I still have that on cassette somewhere. Here, I purchased it, but I fell in love with your sound, man. And I says, man, this guy is wow, you know, for his debut recording. But I was just blown away when I looked into your background, the people that you work with, man. What was it like working with Dizzy Gillespie, man?
Oh, it's great. You know, it's funny at that time. Once again, it was just about. I was just old enough to have gotten to New York in time.
Right.
To catch most of my heroes still active and playing around. And so, the first time I met Dizzy because I was playing in the late night jam session band at the Blue Note with Philip Harper.
Yeah.
And we were opening, you know, we were playing after Dizzy Gillespie's band, and I was there early because I wanted to see Dizzy. And John Lee, the bass player, was late. And Dizzy was walking around looking for someone to play electric bass, and he saw me with my guitar and said, "Hey, can you play bass?" and actually, obviously, but man, there was no way in the world I was going to say yes to that and get up on stage and risk not doing my best playing with Dizzy. So I was like, "Oh no, sir, he's like, "All right, get on, you know, whatever, kid, you know." But I got to be very close with Dizzy and John Faddis.
Great trumpeter, yeah.
And then I played with Dizzy some, and he let me, the great Ed Cherry was Dizzy's guitar player. And so I had a few opportunities to play with Dizzy. I guess Ed, for whatever reason, couldn't make it. And then I did some concerts, a lot of concerts actually, during the 1991, opening for Dizzy. So I had a trio out, and we played, and Dizzy was great. Firstly, he was probably that generation to our music's greatest communicator. Yeah. You know, and that's not always in the form of a speech. You know, some people think that great communicators in jazz music have to be guys who give great speeches, or like someone like Wynton, or or Dr. Billy Taylor, and they were great, and they're certainly great at that, and that's important. Dizzy was able to communicate. I'm sure it had a lot to do with his generation and this political climate, the social climate of the country when he was coming up. He had sort of an innate ability to communicate, a lot of sophistication, and intellectual sophistication through his music and the way he performed. And he did it all with a sense of humor. And I think a lot of people thought that the sense of humor was him clowning. I think in some point I've heard, well, Dizzy was sort of clown and did things to maybe dilute the message. And I took it just the opposite.
Yeah.
I felt like his sense of humor was the way that he coped.
Yeah.
With social injustice. And I've seen so many people do that. If you allow, you never stop taking the world seriously. But if you take it so seriously that it impedes your ability to enjoy what you're doing, you're allowing whatever that is to hurt you. And I feel like Dizzy found a way. You would never really know who or what he was laughing at, but he was having a good time, and that's good enough for me.
Yeah, and also, man, you played with the great Art Blakey too.
Absolutely.
What was that like, man?
It was like having my guitar on my shoulder, being strapped to the front of a freight train. What's the old Superman thing? Faster than a speeding locomotive. It was kind of like being strapped to the front of a train, and you can't see what's ahead, and it's moving full steam. And all you know is if you do your job and hold on, the train won't run over you. But if at any point you miss a step or take your hands off the wheel, the train is just gonna run right over you.
Yeah.
And with art, I have to. It's funny. I think if I hired a drummer today, and he approached playing my music like that, I would probably be offended. Like not being sensitive or interactive or
right.
But the way that Art Blakey did it, it wasn't just because he was Art Blakey and I revered him in such a way, but it was also because he had such a love for the music and a love for the musicians.
Yeah.
And he had a love for the process of training and teaching young cats. So I felt like I didn't get to play with him a lot. It was on the occasions that I did play with him. Even if I was just sitting in, he look at you and smile, and then he would hit, and he would let you know with the way he played whether or not you were doing okay. And the most the biggest expression of his love and approval was if you got to come back the next night and do it again.
Wow, that's incredible, man. How'd you, so many greats that you played with. How'd you hook up with Quincy Jones?
I was signed to Warner Brothers, thanks to George Benson. I had met George early in my early jam session days, playing around the city after getting out of college.
Yeah.
And between George, it was George's endorsement of me that gave me the because I did not feel deserving of a record deal at all, but I had just gotten married. We had a kid on the way, and I was like, well, my son, he didn't ask to be here, so my humility aside and get a record deal and get some gigs. You know what I mean?
Right.
All I wanted to do was be able to put food on the table. So George's endorsement gave me enough confidence to make a demo tape. I had a great manager at the time, a guy named Paul Tannen. And he paid, he put some money up so I could make this demo, and he sent it to his friend Mo Austin, who was Tommy the Puma's boss over at Warner Brothers, and then George gave me, George co-signed it, and the Marksman came out. And so now I'm out, and I was out with Roy Hargrove and Chris McBride as part of the Jazz Futures, and we did, that, and being in that ensemble throughout 1991 kind of put me on the map, it put all of us young guys from my generation, the Young Lions, the second iteration of the Young Lions, that put us kind of on the map and on the radar of all the legends.
Yeah.
And Quincy was in the middle of a long run as artistic director at the Montreux Jazz Festival. Claude Nobbs was his great friend, and Quincy was there.
Miles Davis did his last thing with Quincy in '91. Right. Yeah,
absolutely. And so we as Jazz Futures, we opened for Miles all over Europe the summer of '91.
Oh wow!
Before he passed. So yeah, we and actually in Switzerland, at Montreux, we didn't open for Miles, but I got to, but because I was out with that group and on Quincy's radar. You know, Quincy had started his own label, Quest Records. That was
Mm-hmm.
how it started. But it was underneath the Warner Brothers umbrella.
Yeah.
And there was some talk about, because I'd become friends with Benny Medina, who was Quincy's protege, working a lot for him, and so there was some talk maybe about moving me over to Quincy's label, and he invited me to be a guest. In fact, I was just looking at a video of this the other day, to be a guest. He did, Quincy did this album, Smackwater Jack, with the Count Basie band, where he playing his arrangements, and he conducted with all these guests, George Benson and Freddie Hubbard and so on and so forth. And so he reenacted the recording of that record live on stage at the Montreux Jazz Festival. He invited me to be a guest. So he had George Benson with me. So I'm standing between George Benson and George Duke. And then and of course, with the Count Basie band with Frank Foster. But since Quincy was conducting, Frank Foster was playing in the band. Clark Terry and Plas Johnson were guests also. Shaka Khan and Rochelle Farrell. Did Movies Move for Love, and Shaka sang Night Tunisia. They did all these great things from that out, from kind of mostly from that record, and a few things from other places in Quincy's career that had big bands. And that was great. That was it, And I was, somebody just sent me, they saw it on YouTube, sent me the clip, and I'm sitting there, man. I still get goosebumps watching it. Because I'm standing next to George and we're playing Manteca, the Dizzy Gillespie tune, and Chris Joseph says, "Now, Mark Whitfield." I'm looking up at George, and George's like, "Go get him, brother!" And I was like, "Ah!"
Man!
So I did what I normally do. I closed my eyes, man, leaned back, and played everything I had, and it went okay. But man, those moments like that were inspiring enough to propel me further, and that's sometimes when I get to talk about the journey, I like to highlight those moments, because it's not, you look back at a long career. If you've looked, I'm blessed to be able to say I've had a long career.
Yeah.
You look back at it and you say, wow. If it wasn't for that moment, I don't know how I would have gotten through this. So, how did I push through? And how did I push through? And because some people think, well, man, you're really good at what you do. It must have been really easy. and there's nothing that could be further from the truth. Being really good, being, happy. I always say, for me, it's a happy coincidence. I happen to be moderately talented at something that I really enjoy. And so the marriage of those, I worked really hard. And I got to be great, or what I consider to be really good at it. And that's allowed me to have, some longevity. But I look back at these moments where I was around people that were unquestionably great, real masters, and people who had, whose music and contributions, inspired me to want to be a musician and be a better musician. And the interactions that I've had with all of the names you've mentioned.
Yeah.
I do I can't say I do. We did, and hopefully we'll do again, a residency at the Carlisle Hotel here in New York. A friend of mine, the great Lawson Harris, sings and plays piano. We've been friends for 30 years, and we do like a Nat Cole trio thing in there. And Shaka Khan came in, she came in the lounge. She was doing something in the city. She came in, she's like, Mark, people like that I have known literally casually for 30 years. Those are wonderful experiences. And I remember Shaka pulled me to the side. I don't know if I doubt she'd remember this, but that after the concert, because you don't think of George and Shaka and those people as just being. It's hard to remember what they must have been like as young people, kind of teasing each other about stuff, And Shaka called me into her dressing room backstage for a second. She said, "Hey, I want to tell you something." She says, "It's not every day I see somebody make George Benson go."
You just made me think about something. I mean, the fact, like I said, man, you had a really nice sound, and for someone like George Benson to see that in you, like, man, this kid's got talent. He's going somewhere, and he sort of helped you in the early process. Now, speaking of George Benson, one of his influences was Wes Montgomery. Was Wes influence on you too?
Oh, of course. It's a funny thing now. A lot of younger people. I'll be 54 this year, so I figure people that are under the age of 40
Right.
have no idea what life was like before the internet, before YouTube, before you had all these avenues, venues where you could, or vehicles to see, actually watch your heroes or the people you admire in action. We didn't have, and so I got to see George on that television show, on PBS special. Luckily, we had a TV and a VCR, and I had a blank cassette handy, and so I was able to record it. But it's not, if I had missed it, I would just have to go by what I saw. And and of course this was, I was born in '66. Wes died in '67 or '69, and so I certainly never got a chance. Would have never got to see him. I never got to see Grant Green.
Yeah, Grant is another great so,
I obviously did get to see, hear, and meet and get to know Kenny Burrell very well. But just knowing that Wes played with his thumb, I could tell there was something different by the way he played with it. You could from the sound of the recordings, but I never saw him. So I had no idea what it looked like, or how he did it. And then when I got to know George talked, would tell me what it was like to be in the city and hang out. Said he and Wes Montgomery would go uptown and sit in with Grant Green, up at Small's Paradise, and he talked about what it was like, the kind of things. He said Grant used to tease Wes about playing with his thumb. That's what I mean about we see these guys as our heroes. We don't think of them as human beings. He said, George said, Wes would play and it was great, and then Grant would play, look at George and say, yeah, that old Montgomery's all right, but he needs to come up off that thumb and get him a pick, right, brother? Right. And I was just like, what? Man. It's amazing to even imagine something like that. But when I got to Berkeley, there were a lot of recordings that I was unaware of. I tease my kids because both of my sons went to school there, and they're 3 years apart. So when Mark Jr. went, he had a laptop that was loaded up with about 5,000 songs. And and Davis a few years later probably had 10,000 songs in his. And I said, when I went to Berkeley, I had a record player and 19 records. That was my entire music collection. And I had stolen a few of those from my parents and one from my brother-in-law.
They're exposed to so much now. They have everything at their fingertips, There
were three guys, the great Billy Kilson, the drummer, the great Ron Savage, four guys, the great Ron Savage, drummer, the great James Gates, saxophone player, and a guy named Louis DuPont, who was a guitar player, a student of Pat Martino's, and the guy who owned a record store called Looney Tunes in Boston. Okay. It was a store that you could buy new and used records, and I spent every dime I could. It was right around the corner of Berkeley. I'd walk around there. You could buy a John Coltrane record from the used bin for 99 cents. And so I would go and I was and Louis would say no. And Louis was also the bootleg king. He had all these. He was the guy. He was a network of guys around the world who shared these bootleg recordings of you could hear George Coleman live here and George Benson here, and so I go in and Louis, if you got to be friendly with him, he turned me on to to this. Hey, you haven't heard Pat Martino play this song? Here, check this cassette out and copy this, and he gave me a stack of written materials study materials that Pat Martino had written out for him when he was taking lessons, and it was a very organic feeling to the scene. Because it wasn't, nowadays, and I don't knock the way that things get done now. I think it's amazing that there's this virtual network where, I can transcribe a solo and write it out, put it up on the internet for the whole world to enjoy. That's wonderful. But there was something very fulfilling about I had to go out and search these things out and find these people and it made me feel like I was a part of a living, breathing thing. That the music was tangible and organic in that way. And I took a lot of pride in the music that I learned and practicing, in performing, there's a certain disposable feeling to music nowadays. Like something comes in and the minute it's not popular, it's gone. And we didn't have that at all. Everything that we did back in those days, we cherished because it was valuable because it was so hard to get and so easy to lose.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Mm-hmm.
the cassette tape broke. That was the end. You weren't going to get it back. You know,
That's right.
if your tape player ate your cassette band, they was your favorite George Benson record gone.
Yeah.
Right. So I still, in fact, you mentioned you have an old cassette of mine. I still have a box of cassettes. So one of my roommates, first roommates, there was a guy named Javon Jackson, great saxophone player, great educator.
Yeah, I know Javon. Yeah.
He was my roommate. You know, we met each other at 17 years old, 18 years old, and 17, I guess. And he took pity on me because he could see that I didn't, you know, I didn't know which way it was up, from who to listen to, where to start. You know, you know, and he was like, well, man, you need to. He's like, and I still have cassettes that I dubbed from him.
Wow.
Miles Davis, the plug nickel, you know, on one side, and you know, and then I rated, you know, he, you know, and I knew Delphio Marcellus because we started at school together, and Delphio also had a great collection of music, like stuff he got from his brothers and whatever. And so I would raid their tape collections, and you know, and I had a double tape deck, you know, and I could dub. That, you know, that was my life's blood. That's how I learned to play. And while most of those cassettes probably don't work anymore, I still have them in a box in the closet. I keep them because it reminds me of how far I've come and how hard I worked, you know, and how lucky I am that it all fell in place.
Yeah, just incredible. And like I said, how did you hook up with Burt Bacharach, man? That was surprising when I was looking at your background.
So,
wow.
yeah, once again, it's a small world. I was signed to Verve at the same time that Chris Bodie was signed to Verve, and we never met.
Oh, wow. Okay.
We never met. We were there. I made 5, 6, 7 records, not all as a leader, but I made 4 or 5 as a leader, a couple as a co-leader, and played a bunch of side records for Verve. So I was there between 1994 and 99. And Chris was there. Verve had a jazz label and a smooth jazz label called Verve Forecast. And Chris was signed to the Forecast label, and I may have heard his name. I'll be honest, I don't really, you know, we were in different scenes. But just to go show you how small the music world is, years later, about 2005, I got a call from the great Billy Kilson, drummer, who had left Dave Holland's band, and go with Chris. And Chris was looking to make a change his music up a little bit. What do you think about coming to, you know, play in the band? And at this time, I didn't have a record deal anymore. I was working as a freelance musician. I had a band putting out independent records. I had a record here. You know, the major labels were starting to fall apart at that point. The internet was killing everybody, and no one had kind of figured out what to do. And so when he offered me the job, you know, it was a lot of touring, a lot of money. I had young children. I was like, man, I'll take it. You know, and Chris and I got to be pretty tight. And one of the first concerts we did, Burt Bacharach, we recorded the song "Look of Love." Burt Bacharach came out and played piano with us.
Wow.
So, you know, because you know, I guess Burt was excited to be part of something with these young guys. You know, breathing some new life into one of his old songs.
Yeah.
You know, and so he came out, and so I got to be a part of that. And the funny thing is, my parents were huge Dionne Warwick fans, and so I had been to see Dionne with my parents at the Westbury Music Hall, and saw her, and she talked. Burt Bacharach wasn't at the concert, but she talked a lot about. You know, because he wrote all this music for her, you know, and they were a great team in that way. And so she talked. I kept hearing Burt Bacharach. She talked about his name. What a great writer was. And here I was like, oh my God, you know. And so I actually had the chance to tell Dionne. With Chris, we did a fundraiser concert, a charity concert with Michael Feinstein. Somewhere in Cleveland, somewhere in the Midwest, and Dionne Warwick was there, and she was kind of standing backstage on her, you know, by herself, waiting to go on. And I was like, this, you know, and I'm not this guy. Like I'm never the guy that goes up and says, "Excuse me," you know. I was like, "Oh my God, Dionne Warwick! I just want to tell you." You know, I told the story about how my parents brought me to see her perform when I was a kid, and I was blown away, and that. for most of the people, most of the names that I mentioned when I talk about people that inspired me to become a musician, were these guys who played great instrumentalists. There were very few vocalists, but she was one of them, and I was really honored to meet her. And I couldn't wait to tell my parents that I had shared the stage with Dionne Warwick. And she gave me a big hug, and she was like, "This is, so sweet, whatever, And once again, another one of those, one of those attaboy moments where you get a pat on the back and you're like, "Hey, man, that wasn't bad," And so it was through Chris that I got to perform and interact some with Burt Bacharach. And Dionne Warwick and a lot of other people.
Incredible, man. Another person that you worked with that I was impressed to hear about was Sting.
Yeah, sure.
What was that like?
Well, once again, I'm actually trying to find a light for you. I'm running from because I didn't think this through. So Sting, about the time that Chris's deal with Verve was over, I guess he had gotten to know Sting, and he was in his band. I think Chris might have been the next horn player in Sting's band after Branford left, something like that. After Branford left, and so Sting is an interesting character. I'm a guitar player from Long Island, so while I'll always talk about how much I love playing jazz and how important jazz is to me, I also have a little closet rock guitar player in me. One of the bands that I remember really enjoying listening to when I was about 15 or so and got to Seattle, these kids turned me on to the Police. Like, man, you gotta. I was like, the Police? Who are these guys? But those 4 or 5 records they made, out of all that, songs like "Message in a Bottle" and "Every Breath You Take" were some of my favorite songs.
Yeah.
And so, but man, I never even imagined that I would take a path that would bring me in contact with any of those kind of musicians, guys who big rock stars or whatever. I play jazz guitar, Anyway, I hadn't been in Chris's band more than a month. I just joined the band, and we were going to do his first live concert DVD. He's a smart dude, that Chris Bodie. He was like, "Man, we got to take this up to the next level." His thing was, we're going to make these concert DVDs, and so the concert is a recording session. And so when it's all over, we got a DVD to sell, a CD, the whole thing. And so he put on this event at the Wilshire Theater in LA, and it was, the label supported it, so it was star-studded. And Jill Scott, Gladys Knight, I got to play guitar solo and sort of do a little trading thing off with Gladys Knight. Are you kidding me? Like Gladys Knight. No. And Sting. Sting was, I was like, oh, okay. So I guess that's how, and the band, the Bodie band at the time was Billy Childs, the legendary Billy Childs on piano, Wilson on drums, James Genius, the bass player from everybody, including SNL on bass, and me. We were the 4-piece band, and Chris, and so the 5 of us, we played behind all these great singers. Sting is a very, I'm not really sure, I never kind of paid attention to whatever his public persona, however people perceive him. All I can tell you is he's one of the nicest, most down-to-earth billionaire, multi-millionaires I've ever met, for a guy who has castles in 4 or 5 different countries. He's a pretty humble, down-to-earth guy. Yeah. And a private jet, I might add. And so we, over the years, he has always has his band, whatever it is, and for his tours, they would rehearse and do these big things, but he had lots of little events that he does. Yeah. And he would hire Chris's quintet to be his band for these little things. His wife got a philanthropy award, and Robert Downey was in front of theirs, was presenting her with the award. So we got to play with Sting. It's like I got to play all those songs, "Message in a Bottle," and "Every Breath You Take," and 7 Days, and all these great songs that he'd written. I got to play them with him.
Man.
And he would, I got to go to, and then we played in London. He would come out, and I never got to go to his place in England, but we stayed at his place in Tuscany, and went to the recording studio where he did all that great music there. Spent a lot of time hanging out with him here in New York. Do shows with Chris, and Sting would come and sit in, and we play gigs with Sting. And so over the 7 years or so that I was with Chris, I got to play a lot with Sting. Great guy, I gotta tell you, great music.
That's incredible. Hey, Mark, I wanted to ask you about this Whitfield family band with your sons, man. Tell me about that. Your sons are both great musicians, and one followed in your footsteps and went to Berkeley too. But tell me about them, man, and this little group that you guys, I guess, started back in '94 or something like that.
Well, so Mark was born in '90, and Davis was born in '93.
Okay.
So they both went to Berkeley. Davis plays piano, the youngest, and Mark plays drums. And Mark Jr., let's see, right at the time of COVID, he was in Europe touring with Kurt Rosenwinkel, the guitar player. Mark Jr. is, I know that I'm biased, but he's the best young guy. I mean, and I feel the same way about Davis on the piano. So when as they started coming of age, we always played together because when I got divorced, they came to live with me, and so I was a single dad, and all I knew I really had to do in that sense was keep them close. And my father and I were very close, and so I had a great example of that. And so everything I did, we did it together. And so they were familiar with the scene, and they loved music. And they love to practice and play and do things. And so once they I could see that I could see it happening. There was a window approaching where they were going to become good enough to play with me. And it was going to be a short time before I was no longer good enough to play with them. And that's every father's dream. For me, to see my kids, grow and develop, become mature enough and good, whatever it is, enough so that we can do something together, and then see them pass me by and know that they were going to be okay once it wasn't on me anymore.
Right.
And so I'm so proud to say that moment has come and gone. We made a record together, the Whitfield Family Band.
2017 or something like that?
Yeah, so 3 years ago. We'll do another one. Trust me, we'll do more, and we're still very close. But their careers have started, and so they are. We toured around the world. I took them to Europe, went to Japan. We played around the country. We sold some CDs. We did really good. We had all right. If today was the last day, I could say that I really have left no dream unfulfilled. Especially as a father, man. Davis lives here with me in Jersey City. Mark Jr. and his wife live about a mile away up the hill.
You guys are close. Yeah.
Jersey City is I'm looking out my window at the Holland Tunnel. It's right there. It's so close to Manhattan. It's just for so many reasons. This is a more cost-effective, smart place to live, and it's in New York, Manhattan. It's right there. And so this has been a great find for us. I moved into this neighborhood because my friend Donald Edwards and George Fontanet, they were roommates. They had an apartment around the corner, and I came to visit them.
I was going to ask you, Mark, when you're just home, say, just chilling out, relaxing, maybe just taking it easy, what are you listening to? What artists are you listening to? Or maybe other guitar players? Or, if I were to come by your place and you're just chilling, what do you have on your rotation? What are you listening to?
It's about as eclectic as it can be.
Yeah.
And it's funny, for the way that I described, the way that that I sort of scoured through the record bins back in the day to find music. That's not really how I am about listening to music.
Yeah.
I listen all the time. There's always music playing either in the house or in my car, but I should let music find me. So I listen, and I'll listen to the same things over and over and over until something new comes along. And so Davis is my my hip hop archivist. And so,
I got you.
So Davis, he's a brilliant jazz piano player. But he's got another side. He's just really into underground hip hop. He's been that way. They both are. But he's been that way for years. And so Davis is always like, "Dad, you got to check out Homeboy Sandman. Or you got to check out this." And he's always turning me on to all JID. You got to hear this. And so so sometimes you think you're in the house with a 20-year-old. Listen to all this, modern. But when it comes to music, jazz music, and sort of music of my contemporaries, first of all, there's no guitar player that any guitar player that I see or hear of, I listen to, and it's because I love the guitar.
Yeah.
And it's very, I see so many guys now playing, Leonardo Weke. I know him.
He's a great musician, great guitarist. Yeah, he plays a lot with Herbie Hancock too.
I've gotten to know him because James Genus, the bass player with Herbie, is one of my oldest and best friends.
Yeah,
I'm around them a lot. And Leonel is a great guitar player. I don't know him so well personally because we're different generations and so forth.
Right.
But I love his playing, and he plays so much different. His approach to the instrument is so different. He comes from what they call the African nylon guitar string type, tradition. They have their own tradition of guitar, which is just gorgeous, and he's applied that to jazz and jazz fusion. And I also, when I got on the scene, I was really knocked out by some of the guys who were older than me that I didn't know. Guys like Jack Wilkins or Vic Juris, guys like Joe Cone, people. I met a guy like Rod Afif, and I never get tired of Rodney Jones or Bobby Broom. Or Russell Malone.
Russell Malone, yeah.
Russell was my neighbor. He lived down the block for years. In fact, I tell you, when I first moved into this neighborhood, I was expecting a package, some gear, like a new guitar, whatever, being delivered. And the mailman, an older man, knocked on my door, and there I was in his apartment. I'm standing in my bathroom, And the guy's like, Mark Whitfield, you Mark Whitfield, the guitar player? And I was like, yeah. And he says, oh, cool. He says, my name is so-and-so, and I play a little guitar. I was like, oh, that's great. He says, Russell Malone lives down the street. And I said, yeah, I know. And he says, he's practicing right now. Man, I slammed the door. I was like, get out, don't come back. I called Russell and cursed him out.
That's funny. Hey, Mark, what do you think about guys like, you can listen to guys like, say, John McLaughlin, Pat Metheny, Al Di Meola. You like those guys?
Cool. Those guys, they were already heroes of mine when I was in school.
Yeah.
When I got to Berkeley, those guys, allergy season is full. Everybody loves it when everything's in full bloom except me, because I'm in full sneeze. Right? So anyway, Al Di Meola, of course, came to prominence with Return to Forever, and it was great, and the guitar teacher that I had when I was a kid on Long Island, Vinny Nazaro, he played guitar in that style. He played a Les Paul, he played super fast, and he's the one who taught me how to play that. Gave me an appreciation for having that kind of technique to get my chops together. In fact, if I'm 54, Vinny's got to be in his 60s, and I tell you what, I still wouldn't go by his house and challenge him to a speed contest. I know better. So a guy like Al, and then graduated to John McLaughlin, and I got to and I've had a chance to either meet or play with all those guys. I got to know Pat. I don't know Pat Metheny very well, but I got to meet him. And we never played together. But I got to talk to him some. I know John Scofield quite well.
Another great one, yeah.
And I'm a huge fan. Mick Goodrick is a guy who didn't get a lot.
He's great.
But he was, and I also got to know and play some with John Abercrombie, who was just
I love John Abercrombie. Yeah.
So, and one of the guys whose name I haven't mentioned much, but probably the guitar player from the generation right ahead of mine and right behind George, sort of in between George Benson and me, who's had the deepest impact on my life is Kevin Eubanks. Kevin.
I just had Kevin on the show last week.
Yeah, we were just texting yesterday, and so when I was a freshman at Berkeley, the fall of 1983,
Yeah.
Kevin Eubanks' album Guitarist, his first record, had just come out. He hadn't been too long gone from Berkeley at that point himself, right? He was coming back and forth to Boston doing a lot. It was through Kevin that I got to play with Roy Haynes and Art Blakey.
Oh, man. Wow.
He was a guitar player that if any of those band leaders wanted a guitar, Kevin was the guy they called. You know,
right.
He was the one. He was the guy in that scene. And so, anyway, I had for a brief moment, my first month or two in school, I was so panicked because so many these guitar players were just so much more proficient than me. So I went from practicing a few hours a day, which I thought was a lot, to now I'm in there 6-7 hours a day practicing and playing with guys, just kind of playing guitar around the clock. And I started developing a problem with my right wrist. My form left a little bit to be desired, and it was causing me some pain. And at that time, Kevin was coming to give a master class at Berkeley, and I went and I asked a few questions, and when it was over, he was sitting down talking to a guitar player that I knew, a guy named Anthony Pearson. I went and sat with him, and I let Kevin check out my guitar. And he was like, "Man, I like your guitar, man." And I said, "Well, look, man, I got to ask you. I'm having a problem with my hand, and I'm scared. I don't want to end up with tendonitis." And he said, "Well, let me see what I'll never forget this. Let me see what you're doing." And I started playing. He's like, "Oh my God, man, that is the ugliest right hand technique I've ever seen. How have you gotten by this far with that?" And I was like, "Well, man, in 30 seconds, he took my wrist and he said, "Man, you got to hold your arm straight. Long story short, you have to see each line, each part, each section of your arm as a path for energy, for the flow of energy." Okay. And so, the more bends and curves and twists you have, the more the more impeded the flow of energy will be. And so you don't want that.
Yeah.
So in 5 minutes, he showed me. He suggested a way that I could play. It took me about 6 months to get it together, but thanks to him, I'm still playing pain-free. And
fantastic, man. That's great. Helped you with your technique, And so, that's great.
And so just to give you an idea of how important George and Kevin are to me, just as two people, a few weeks ago, I did my first live performance in New York City in front of people since March, right? Because this year I put together this all-star band with the great Kurt Lightsey, piano player who Kevin used to work with all the time. So I had Kurt Lightsey, Santi DiBriano on bass, and the great Victor Lewis on drums, and that's a quartet. We got the first weekend. We played the side door in Connecticut. And we played a week. We played 2 nights at Smalls, 2 nights at Metro. We were on our way to DC to play Blues Alley, and then we were going to go to Europe. I had all these things going on, right? And we got the first weekend, it got canceled. I've been doing dual performances here, on the internet with my son playing piano.
I saw some of your stuff, man. This is real nice.
And I've had some people, and now that we've all sort of lived through the first wave. I've invited some people to come, good friends of mine whom I know I can trust. They come by and we do some duets. But this was going to be my first performance, playing out, and I was nervous, man. Here I am, 53, man, and it was just going to be like it was in a courtyard,
right,
at a church in Chelsea, where it's a school. They have a big court, you know what I mean? And me and some guys play, and man, so I got up and I'm listening to George Benson records, listening to Kevin Eubanks, and I'm making breakfast, and getting all excited. So man, I got in the car and I was like, and I called George, and I called George, and George, and he answered the phone after one ring. He said, "Wait a minute, Mark Whitfield, what's going on?" Because George is out in Phoenix, and he's like, "Man, little brother, how you doing?" We talked, and luckily there was traffic. So we talked about 20 minutes or so, and I felt so good. I told him, I said, "Man, George, I've been up listening to you." I told him what I was doing. He just started laughing. He said, "Man, that's cute, brother." He said, "Man, come on, you're gonna be fine, right?" So, when he got off the phone with him, I was like, "Man, let me call Kevin." So then I called Kevin. I said, "Kevin," and he's like, "Hey, man, what's going on?" And he's out in LA. And so I told him, I said, "Man, I'm gonna be honest with you, I'm scared." I said, and I don't even know what I'm scared of. I said, man, playing guitar and playing music and playing with people is so important to me
Right.
that this little performance, probably for 50 people, has got me all shook up. Like, I don't know what I'm, so we just started talking about, and I think what it is for me more than anything else is you don't want to lose it.
Right, right.
You know, I've never in my life been forced, or not forced, but had cause to think about how valuable the actual opportunity, the act of playing music for people is for me. Because it's never, other than feeling like I might have had a pain here or there, or somehow, I've never felt like it's been threatened to be taken away. And man, I mean, I don't know if I got locked up with the jail, I could get a guitar and play music somehow. Like, just,
right.
You know what I mean? Like, God forbid, but I mean, my point is, like, all of a sudden, with nothing happened, without any disastrous, nothing going on, all of a sudden my career is gone. My ability to play music for people has been taken away. And so I was so grateful to, have that one thing. And it's funny, I was talking to Kevin, and Kevin was like, man, I'm not coming out the house until they sound till I hear the second round of All Clear Bells. But he was basically saying the same thing. He said, well, man, he said you spend the first month sort of re-examining your playing, and then the second month you sort of spend that time re-examining yourself.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? He said, man, and this much time of being still and no motion and all the self-reflection is tough.
Yeah.
And all these emotions, man. And we started playing. It was great. But dude, I could have played all night. Like, I can tell that after a while, people were like, "Okay, man, we gotta go."
Yeah. You know what's interesting, Mark? I mean, of course, you see a lot of musicians live streaming now. I had Al Di Meola on the other week too.
Right.
And he was saying, he says, man, all of my gigs are canceled. He says, and everything has been rescheduled to summer 2021. He said that's if things get better. And I had Billy Cobb on. So yeah, musicians are just going through it right now, man. It's a tough time, and they have to, step back, reevaluate things. And I guess during this time, I mean, are you still writing or composing music? I mean, I'm sure you got a lot of stuff going on.
I had stopped writing so much, I was doing more, but man, I've really gotten back into it. I've written a lot of music. I've been recording. I've got a setup here at the house, and I'm recording music. And I've been, I haven't done any of those, multi-screen things. You see where guys are kind of playing together.
Right.
I'm going to wait on that until we can get back together, and I'll start. But I've made a lot of recordings in my life, and so I feel like if I was younger and more sort of really eager to get my sound out there, I'd be doing anything I could. But I've got a lot of recordings out there, right? And so right now I'm doing a lot of guitar parts for people. Artists. I played on something for a guy it's for Janelle Monáe, and I played on something for a few other people, something I think that Drake is going to use, and stuff stuff you can do guitar parts on, things like that for people. And listen, if this goes on another year, then yes, we'll have to find a new. I'll even have to find a new way to make records because that's it. We got to find a way. But for Al to say everything is rescheduled for 2021. I mean, sure. I had stuff that was scheduled for the fall of that was rescheduled for the fall of 2020. Like, there were things back in April that we had signed contracts for, rescheduled for September. Which obviously aren't going to happen. So I've got a good friend, a guy that works for legendary Martin Brodeur, and so he was saying that the state employees of New Jersey, a lot of them are being told that they shouldn't even consider going back to work until there is a vaccine in place. And so having said something like that, I realized, well, I mean, and William Calhoun, the drummer from Living Colour, we went to Berkeley together, and we were great friends. And we hadn't played together in years. And we did a great quartet gig at Scullers up in Boston in February. And we were like, man, this is a great band. We got to do some more, you know, and nothing, you know, and so we were talking on the phone a couple of weeks ago. He mentioned that he was supposed to go to Eastern Europe with Darryl Jones and Jean-Paul Borelli, the great guitar player. They had a trio record a number of years ago, and they were going to go to Eastern Europe, and they had all these huge concerts lined up. And you know, and in a number of Eastern Bloc countries, what we used to call Eastern Bloc countries, the attitude towards COVID is a little different. Either they don't have a lot of cases, or they just, you know, they're just not worried about it. So he said the guy from Serbia was like, man, the concert's still on. Just come on over. We're going, you know, it's going to be great. He's like, about that. Like, you know, like, man, you know, the payday is really tempting.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you get over there, somebody, he said, man, you know, and Calhoun is so funny. He's like, man, somebody sneezes on the plane. I'm stuck in quarantine for 2 weeks in Serbia.
He's right. He's right.
You know, and he's so right about that. And so while it was funny, my wife, she lives and works in Florida. You know, and so she's got this amazing job there. And so we commute back and forth. You know, as I'm obviously, it's going to be very hard for me to live someplace other than close to New York.
Right.
And so we've been commuting, and obviously this is, you know, she was here for all of March and April. Right. Until they reopened the office, and then I went down there and stayed a while, and so she was here for a couple of weeks, and she left today. Our anniversary was a week ago, so she came in. Man. Our 9th anniversary, yes. And so she left today. You know, and I kept saying, yeah, babe, don't worry, it's going to be great, you know. And I realized that in our conversations, I've been identifying January 1st as when, like, everything was going to be, like, somehow, like, the virus was concerned with the calendar. Like, COVID's like, look, I'm only sticking around until January 1st, and you guys are good. And I realized, you know, it's just that sort of unrealistic attitude is what prevents us from making good plans.
Yeah.
And I think is what keeps me personally from having a realistic approach to the future. So I started trying to, you know, to recalibrate my thinking. I've got a couple of great online teaching jobs. So I'm offering guitar lessons through the new school here in the city and the Guitar Intensive out in California. You know, as you can see, once you get me started, it's hard to stop.
No, man, I enjoy it. That's one of the things that I always like for the artists when they come on the show is to talk, and for me to say less. And like I said, it's been very enlightening. I've been so excited to have you on, and I love your energy, man. It's been great. Well, listen, I want to thank you for being on Jazz Talk today. You're a treasure. Love you, man. Love your music. And hang on, I'm about to close out the show. Well, you've heard it from the great Mark Whitfield. And as the saying goes, if the music grooves and makes you move, it must be jazz. I'm Preston Williams with Jazz Talk signing off. Peace.